Hola, bienvenidos a Aprendamos Español 2. Yo soy Dr. Daniel Viamonte, su maestro de Español 2. Y junto con su facilitador vamos a terminar lección 1 de unidad 6. Bueno, la última vez, last time, we covered, para empezar, un cuento de Nuevo México, La ceniza. We discussed extending, accepting, and declining invitations. We talked about expressions of doubt and expressions of certainty. And we took a look at Costa Rica. The homework that's due today. Tarea número 1. Dime 2, página 284, para empezar. Actividad A, 1 hasta 8. Tarea 2, en Dime 2, actividad C, 1 hasta 8. La tarea 3, Dime 2, páginas 286 y 287, en actividad D, 1 hasta 10, y actividad E, 1 hasta 8. Y la última, número 4, para leer Costa Rica, rica en todo sentido. And Dime 2, and those were on pages 292 to 293. We wanted you to do Verificamos on page 293, numbers 1, 2, and 3. So, facilitator, would you please collect that homework now? Hoy nosotros vamos a discutir en lección 1 de unidad 6, ¿qué decimos al preparamos para una excursión? We'll take a look at double object pronouns with commands, infinitives, the NDO forms. We'll also start our grammar review in the back of the textbook. ¿Qué decimos al preparamos para una excursión? This will be found in Dime 2, your textbook, on page 281. So would you please turn to page 281. In this segment of the telenovela, we use the language needed to make and respond to invitations. We also give and react to suggestions in the context of preparations for Daniel, Martin, and Señor Galindo's camping trip. You will notice that in the telenovela, Mateo uses some Mexican-American expressions that may not be familiar to most of us. For instead of hola, he says quinoble. Instead of fantástico, he says que padre. Instead of caramba, híjole. So these would be regional or Mexican-American expressions. Now, in scene number 1, so if you'll please follow along as we go through and explain what's going on in the scenes. In scene number 1, vamos a acampar. In this, we see Mr. Galindo and his sons preparing for a trip. However, Martin is practicing basketball, and his father says to him, I doubt that you need so much practice. Besides, we need you. Come and help us with the suitcases and bring me the sleeping bags. Yes, Dad, I'll bring them to you immediately. Mateo greets Mr. Galindo, and he asks, what are you doing? And where is Daniel? From inside the driver's seat, Daniel pops his head out and responds, Hi, Mateo. We're going camping this weekend. Really? Oh, fantastic. Where are you going? Asks Mateo. Well, Mr. Galindo responds, We're going to Aguirre Springs on the ridge of the mountains near Las Cruces. Why don't you come with us, Mateo? Hey, I would love to, but I may have to work. Besides, I would have to ask my father for permission. May I tell you later? Oh, of course, Mateo. I await your phone call, said the father. Scene 2. Que les vaya bien. Is that all? Asked Martin. Well, the only thing left is the food, but we'll leave that for tomorrow, said Mr. Galindo. The two girls, Tina and Margarita, arrive, and Tina asks, "Where are you going with so much stuff?" Margarita, upon hearing where they were going, says, "In winter? Are you crazy? It's pretty cold, right?" Martin responded, "Come on, we are strong. Besides, we're going to be well covered." "Well, good. Hope all goes well for you in the cold," mocks Margarita. "Well, we have to get going, Margarita. We're in a hurry. Hope all goes well for you. Until later," says Tina. And again, Margarita makes fun at Martin. "Hope all goes well for you in the cold." Scene 3. ¿Por qué no vamos nosotras? As the girls are walking, they look at each other, and Margarita asks Tina, "Why don't we go too? My parents love to go camping." "Well, my parents have to work this weekend," responded Tina. "But I will ask them if I can go." Daniel asks Martin, "How can you put up with her?" "Oh, that's Margarita. She's always exaggerates, and she's always like that. She never changes. But she's not so bad," replied Martin. Nina says to Daniel, "Mateo just called. He says that he will not be able to go with you. He has to work the whole weekend." Did you already hang up, Nina? I wanted to talk with him," Daniel said. "Oh, I'm sorry. Dinner is already, and Mom says that you should all come in to eat," responded Nina. Scene 4. On page 283. Eres un genio. Somewhere on the road in New Mexico, we find the car, and it's not working. Mr. Galindo does not know why the car is not running. "I don't know either, Dad," responds Daniel. "I think all the fuses are okay. I don't see any of them blown out." "Come here, son. Help me over here. Do you see that large screwdriver? Hand it to me, please," Daniel's father said. So Daniel handed him the screwdriver, and Mr. Galindo continued, "You know that I know nothing about motors either. It's going to get dark soon, and I doubt that there is a service station near here." "Don't worry," shouted Martin from inside the van. "It can't be anything serious. It was just working just fine a little while ago, and the van is not that old. Did you check the battery?" "What do you know about cars, Martin? The battery is only 2 years old, and it's guaranteed for 5 years, said Daniel. "Well, regardless of all of that," said Martin, "if the terminals are dirty..." "Martin, you are a genius! One of the terminals is well corroded," said Mr. Galindo. "Give me the wire brush, Daniel." "Try it now, Daniel," said the father. As they started to ride down the road, Martin casually mentioned to Daniel, "Excuse me, Daniel, what was that you were saying? Could you repeat what you said?" It seems that Martin knew more about cars than both of them thought. Let's watch the telenovela now. and follow along in your textbooks.
Al prepararnos para una excursión. 1. Vamos a acampar. El señor Galindo y sus hijos se preparan para una excursión.
Martín, dudo que necesites tanta práctica. Además, te necesitamos. Ven, ayúdanos con las maletas y tráeme los sacos de dormir.
Sí, papá, te los traigo enseguida.
¿Qué huele, Martín? Señor Galindo.
Hola, Mateo.
¿Qué tal? ¿Qué hacen ustedes? ¿Dónde está Daniel?
Hola, Mateo. Vamos a acampar este fin de semana.
¿De veras? ¡Qué padre! ¿A dónde van?
Vamos a Aguirre Springs, en la sierra, cerca de las cruces. ¿Por qué no nos acompañas, Mateo?
Sí, Mateo, ven con nosotros.
Híjole, me encantaría, pero es posible que tenga que trabajar. Además, les tendría que pedir permiso a mis papás. ¿Te puedo decir más tarde?
Claro, Mateo, espero tu llamada.
¡Martín!
Dos. Que les vaya bien.
Ya está todo, ¿no?
Solo falta la comida, pero eso lo dejamos para mañana.
¿Qué hubo, Letina? Margarita.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Hola, chicas.
Buenas tardes, muchachas.
Hola. ¿A dónde van con tantas cosas?
A Aguirre Springs, a acampar.
Ay, ¿en el invierno? ¿Están locos? Hace mucho frío, ¿no?
¿Qué va? Somos fuertes. Además, nos vamos a abrigar bien.
Bueno, que les vaya bien en el frío. Ya, Margarita, tenemos prisa. Que les vaya bien. Hasta luego. Sí, que les vaya bien en el frío.
3. ¿Por qué no vamos nosotras?
Tina, ¿por qué no vamos nosotras también? A mis papás les encanta acampar. Si mis padres tienen que trabajar este fin de semana, no creo que podamos ir. Pero voy a preguntárselo. Pues vamos.
A esa Margarita. ¡Qué exagerada! Y siempre es así, nunca cambia.
¿Cómo la aguantas?
Pues no es para tanto.
Daniel, acaba de llamar Mateo. Dice que no puede ir con ustedes. Tiene que trabajar todo el fin de semana.
Ay, nena, ya colgaste. Quería hablar con él.
Lo siento, la comida ya está y mamá dice que vengan a comer.
4. Eres un genio. En la carretera a Nuevo México.
No comprendo por qué no funciona este carro.
Ni yo tampoco, papá. Creo que todos los fusibles están bien. No veo ninguno fundido.
Ven, hijo, ayúdame aquí. ¿Ves ese desarmador grande? Pásamelo, por favor.
¿Este, papá?
Sí. Gracias. Sabes, no creo que sea nada del motor tampoco. Caramba, ya va a anochecer pronto y dudo que haya una gasolinera por aquí.
No te preocupes, papá. No puede ser nada serio. Andábamos bien hace poco y el carro no es tan viejo. ¿Revisaron la batería?
Ay, Martín, ¿tú qué sabes de carros? La batería solo tiene 2 años y tiene garantía de 5.
De todos modos, si las terminales están sucias...
Martín, eres un genio. Una de las terminales están bastante corroídas. Dame ese cepillo, Daniel. Gracias. Ahora, pruébalo, Daniel.
Perdón, Daniel. ¿Qué decías? ¿Me lo puedes repetir?
And by the way, I think one of the brothers was kind of digging in that maybe he did know something about the batteries. Let's take a look at homework number 1. In Dime Dos on page 284. Make sure you read the instructions and complete activity B 1 through 10. Now, last time we talked at some length about double object pronouns, but I do want to continue today with commands and infinitives with double object pronouns and the NDO forms of the verbs. Double object pronouns, as you recall, are attached to affirmative commands. There is a written accent over the stressed syllable of the affirmative command form. Escriba usted una carta a Juan. Can you translate that into English? Escriba usted una carta a Juan. Write a letter to Juan. But you can also say, escríbesela, escríbesela. And still it would say the same thing. Write it to him. Okay? Let's take a look at another one. No escriba usted una carta a Juan. Now this would be in the negative, and it says, don't write a letter to Juan. But I could also say, no se la escriba. Notice this time I put the se la in front of the verb. Okay? Don't write it to him. Double object pronouns may either precede the conjugated form of the verb or be attached to the infinitive or present participle. Manuel no quiere dar un regalo a su mamá. Translation? Manuel does not want to give a present to his mother. Manuel no quiere dar un regalo a su mamá. Manuel no quiere dárselo. Manuel no quiere dárselo. Manuel doesn't want to give it to her. Manuel no se lo quiere dar. And here we use the infinitive, dar. Another example. Estamos leyendo una novela a los niños. Estamos leyendo una novela a los niños. Can you translate that into English, please? Okay. We are reading a novel to the children. Se la estamos leyendo. Or, estamos leyéndosela. Estamos leyéndosela. We are reading it to them. Okay. Object pronouns that have endings NDO in the verb form. These are object pronouns, and they precede the conjugated verb or follow and are attached to the NDO verb form of the present progressive. Now, let's look at some examples. Ernesto está haciéndomelo. Haciéndomelo. Ernest is doing it for me. ¿Te las están preparando ahora mismo? ¿Te las están preparando ahora mismo? Are they preparing it for you right now? Let's try a few of these for practice. As we go through these, fill in the blanks with the correct forms of the double object pronouns. Let's take a look at number 1. ¿Me compraste el pan? Did you buy me the bread? Sí. Te lo compré. Sí, te lo compré. Number 2. ¿Tus padres te dieron mucho dinero? ¿Tus padres te dieron mucho dinero? No, ellos nos los dieron. ¿Les escribiste una carta a tus padres? ¿Les escribiste una carta a tus padres? Sí. Blank, escribí. And the answer would be sí. Se la escribí. Number 4. ¿Quién te dio esa revista? Un amigo blank dio. Un amigo me la dio. Un amigo me la dio. ¿Me trajiste el periódico? Did you bring me the paper? ¿Me trajiste el periódico? No. No, blank, traje. So here we want no, no te lo traje. No, no te lo traje. Número 6. ¿Compraste comida para tu amigo? ¿Compraste comida para tu amigo? Sí. Blank, compré. Sí, se la compré. Sí, se la compré. Número 7. ¿Tu profesora les explicó bien estas lecciones? Did your teacher explain well the lessons? These lessons? Sí, Ella, blank, explicó muy bien a nosotros. So, what would I put here? Sí. Ella nos las explicó muy bien a nosotros. Well, I hope that little practice helped us understand a little bit about how to use it. So now for homework number 2, in your cuaderno, your workbook, on page 66, Activity B and Activity C. In Activity B, do 1 through 6. In Activity C, do 1 through 4. Also in your cuaderno, on pages 68 and 69, complete the activity F 1 through 6, activity G 1 through 6, and activity H 1 through 6. As we start to wind down the year's Spanish 2, I will be reviewing with you in the back of Dime Dos in the section called Grammar Review. So we're going to be using in this section the back of your textbook in Dime Dos. I will highlight a few areas in each lesson and ask that you thoroughly review the sections each and every time we do this. If you need to practice, use a few of the exercises in that particular section to help review. But I'll show you as we go along. Now, let's begin with Unit 1 of Lesson 1. Now, in your textbook, it's in the G section, and it's page G2. Would you please open up your books to the back, the G section, and find page G2. On page G2, you'll see that it is Unit 1, Lesson 1. And we begin with the verbs gustar and encantar. These two verbs express likes and dislikes. And encantar is used to talk about or to express things that you really like, or as we say in English, oh, I love that. Both verbs are always preceded by an indirect object pronoun. In that book, you will see an example. ¿Te gusta? Do you like it? ¿Le gusta la música? He or she likes music. Nos encanta bailar. We love to dance. So as you see, for each one of these, there are examples in your book for you to review. On page G3, you will notice some additional practice exercises. Don't be afraid to pick out a few, and if you can do it, move on. But if you have trouble, take a few minutes to go over it. On page G4, the present indicative tense. There you will see that we have the endings for AR, ER, and IR verbs in the present tense. Use that yellow box that you find on page G4 to remind yourself of the endings. The examples here were miró, mirás, mira, miramos, miran. For the ER verb, leer, leo, lees, lee, leemos, leen. And for the IR verb, asistir, asisto, asiste, asistes, asiste, asistimos, asisten. Don't forget that if you are not quite sure, try a couple of the examples that follow that yellow box. Let's move on to page G7. G7 deals with those question words. Remember that question words are used to request information. On page G7, in the blue box, you will be reminded of the 10 question words that we dealt with this year. It's important to remember that question words that appear in statements will require the written accents. ¿A dónde? ¿Dónde? ¿Cómo? ¿Cuál or cuáles? ¿Qué? ¿Cuándo? ¿Cuánto or cuánta? ¿Cuántos? ¿Cuántas? ¿Por qué? Two words. ¿Por qué? And ¿quiénes? And it follows with some examples on when it is used. On page G9, Lesson 2, the verb estar, present tense. Remember that the verb estar is used to talk about conditions. When we talk about conditions, we're talking about health, taste, current appearance. We use the verb estar to indicate location of people and things. ¿Dónde están las papas? ¿Estamos en la misma clase? ¿Está a la derecha? We're indicating location of people and or things. We also use estar to inform or to form the progressive with the NDO form of the verbs. Estoy, estás, está, estamos, están. You'll see that in the yellow box on page G9. On page G11, here we enter present tense stem changing verbs. In the yellow box, you will see some examples of the stem changing verbs. Study this list and notice that what the verbs do. Some verbs have irregular stems. The stem is the infinitive minus the AR or the ER or the IR ending. The only exception is in the nosotros or nosotras form. Again, you will see some examples there to illustrate. Page G14. On page G14, take a look at some of the irregular verbs. This list of irregular verbs in the yo form are listed on page G14. Please review these. On page G16, adjectives. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. Remember that adjectives reflect both the gender, masculine or feminine, and the number, whether it's singular or plural, of the noun. An adjective which describes both a masculine and a feminine noun must always be in the masculine plural form. That's the nosotros form. If it was all feminine and there was more than one, then it would be the nosotras form. You'll see some examples following the blue box. Page G17. The verbs ser, ir, and tener. Now, these are very common Spanish verbs. Ser is used in the following ways: to identify a person, a place, or a thing. Ellas son mis primas. They are my cousins. La educación es importante. Education is important. We're identifying persons or places or ideas or things. Ser is used to describe inherent characteristics. El colegio es grande. The school is big. We're describing inherent characteristics. We use ser to tell origin or nationality. Somos venezolanas. We are Venezuelan. It tells us where we are from. The verb ir is used to talk about places, going places. And sometimes we add a. So it's ir plus a plus whatever location. Vamos a El Paso. We're going to El Paso. We use ir to talk about future activities. And again, it's ir plus a plus the infinitive. Mañana van a jugar fútbol. Tomorrow they're going to play soccer. The verb tener is used in the following ways: to talk about possessions, relationships, commitments, and age. Tengo una mochila nueva. I have a new backpack. Tenemos muchos amigos. We have a lot of friends. Pepe tiene clase a las 9. Pepe has a class at 9 o'clock. Mi hermano tiene 14 años. My brother is 14. So here we're talking about possessions, relationships, commitments, and age. That's when we'd use tener. We also would use tener to talk about obligations. And here we would use tener que plus the infinitive. Tengo que llamarla. I have to call her. Tienen que practicar. They have to practice. We also use tener to form certain idiomatic expressions. And if you look on page G18, you will see a whole list of them. Tener calor, tener frío, tener hambre, tener sed, tener cuidado, tener sueño, tener ganas de, tener prisa, tener miedo, tener razón, tener suerte. Let's turn to page G20. On G20, we're looking at hacer in expressions of time, present tense. Now, when do we use these? To tell how long someone has been doing something. So here we would say, hace 2 semanas que asiste a la universidad. So notice we're doing hace plus some period of time, día, hora, semana, mes, año. We add the word que, and then we use the present tense. We also use hacer to ask how long someone has been doing something. For example, ¿cuánto tiempo hace que plus the present tense? So in the example, ¿cuánto tiempo hace que estudias español? How long have you been studying Spanish? And for most of you, the answer would be 2 años. The next example there is ¿cuánto tiempo hace que toca el piano Pedro? How long has Pedro been playing the piano? Again, if you're having trouble with these, there are some wonderful examples that follow. Practice a few, and when you think you've got it, then move on to page G22. Now, we've just recently been talking about these, the direct object pronouns. Direct object pronouns answer the question, what or who or whom after the verb. Now, if you look at the blue box on page G22, you'll be able to review some of the direct object pronouns. Like indirect object pronouns, direct object pronouns are placed before conjugated verbs. ¿Me quieres? Do you like me or love me? Te adoro. I adore you. Either before the conjugated verb or after and attached to an infinitive or that NDO ending verb form. Voy a hacerla ahora. ¿Están mirándonos? We could do it after and attached to the affirmative command form, such as dime, tell me, or pídelas, order them. A written accent is always required when a pronoun is attached to the NDO verb form or to command forms with 2 or more syllables. You see 2 examples on page G23 on the top. If you're not sure, there are a couple of practice opportunities for you on page G23. On page G24, possessive adjectives. Possessive adjectives are used to indicate that something belongs to someone or to establish a relationship between people or things. They precede and agree in number and gender with the noun they modify. Again, if you look at the blue box on page G24, you will see the possessive adjectives and some examples of the possessive adjectives. On page G27, the preterite of regular and 3 irregular verbs. The preterite is used to talk about what happened in the past. There are 2 sets of endings for regular verbs in the preterite. One for AR verbs and one for both ER and IR verbs. Use the yellow box to review the preterite verb endings. On page G28, these are the irregular preterites of ir, ser, and hacer. If you look in the yellow box on page G28, fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. And you'll notice it's the same for ser. So ir and ser have the same forms for the preterite. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. For the verb hacer, hice, hiciste, hizo. Hicimos, hicieron. Study the sameness for that IR and SER. Please review the yellow box. On page G30, Adjectives of Nationality. This section reviews most of the nationalities and shows you how to write and recognize various groups. Please take some time in the next day or two to review these nationalities. You probably will be given several of these on the ACP exam. Make sure that you recognize what country they represent. On page G32, comparatives. Equal versus unequal comparisons. Más que, menos que. More than, less than. Mejor que, peor que. Better than, worse than. Mayor que, menor que. Older than, younger than. Sometimes using tan plus the adjective or adverb plus como, tanto or tanta or tantos or tantas plus a noun plus como. You'll see that on the top of page G33. Las películas es tan buena como el libro. The movie is as good as the book. Sometimes we want to use superlatives. So on page G34, let's take a look at superlatives. You should be able to recognize superlatives because they end in the isimo, the isimo form of the adjective. And it's used to express a very high degree, really, extremely, very, very, of the characteristic of whatever the adjective names. For examples, riquísima, inteligentísima, buenísima. These are superlatives. And superlatives obviously are to express the highest degree of quality. We want to use the definitive article, el or la, los or las, with the thing or quality being compared before the comparative structure. Remember that during the exam, they'll be looking to see if you can match singular and plural, masculine and feminine. When referring to the best or the worst, the oldest or the youngest, use mejor or peor, mayor, menor, preceded by the definitive article. Hoy hicimos, ¿qué decimos al prepararnos para una excursión? We took a look at double object pronouns with command infinitives and do forms. We took a look and started our final grammar review in the back of the textbook. For homework in Dime Dos, page 284, activity B 1 through 10. In your cuaderno, page 66, activity B 1 through 6, activity C 1 through 4, and also in your cuaderno, page 68 to 69, all of the activities for F 1 through 6, G 1 through 6, and H 1 through 6. As you can tell, we've started to review, and therefore we're getting close to that final exam. Thank you, students, for continued hard work and for staying on task. Facilitator, as always, we appreciate your helping us make each and every class useful for our students. So, until next time, remember, excelencia en academia y excelencia en comportamiento hace por un gran estudiante. Muchas gracias. Adiós.